More phone calls coming up. What you saw that you like and didn't like from the weekend. Best and worst of the weekend. He's Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback, senior NFL reporter, back on the program. Let me start with the TJ Watt situation because it's something that we've talked about. And I kept wondering, what are the Steelers waiting for? Like if you're all in with Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf, and then you have to be all in on TJ Watt. So why did it take such a long time to get this deal done?
Well, so first of all, what you're laying out is exactly why I never thought there was any. I mean, you can put TJ Watt and trade in a tweet and it'll probably get a lot of engagement, but that was never on the radar. I mean, it would fly in the face of everything that the Steelers have done, which ostensibly this offseason is to try to make the most of what TJ Watt has left, and going and getting older players that are more his peers like Aaron Rodgers and Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay. So the idea he wasn't going to be a Steeler in 2025, as much as people like to throw those things around, was never on anyone's radar. As for why it took so long, I just think that there's this fast escalation of numbers at so many different positions now that's probably made teams a little queasy. And I think for some teams, and not saying the Steelers specifically, but for some teams, it's almost like they want to see proof that this one deal over here is not just an outlier, right? Like that there are other deals that are going to come in underneath it. So obviously that deal on the edge rusher market was Myles Garrett, which pushed the number from 34, which is where Nick Bosa was, to 40, which is a big jump. But after Myles Garrett gets done, you have Danielle Hunter doing an extension, and he's an older player that was in the mid-30s, right? That deal on an average per year basis was in the mid-30s, and then you see Max Crosby on his, on his fourth contract, I think, doing a deal that was in that range as well, and so. At that point, not only do you have, some data points that the TJ Watt deal isn't a complete, or that the Myles Garrett deal isn't a complete outlier. You also have some older players doing deals that are in that range. And so I think that's where it sort of became an inevitability that the Steelers were going to have to go that extra mile to get them done. And the numbers are very real. This isn't one of those where the initial report is complete garbage and the actual deal is much more reasonable. This was a deal in the 40s, and obviously now that's going to affect other guys, like Trey Hendrickson and Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I wonder about that. That these teams keep waiting and waiting,
Yeah.
and then it's same thing. With the Cowboys with Dak Prescott. You're waiting and you're waiting. Do you need to wait? Micah Parsons waiting.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand the logic. But these are billionaires, and I don't understand their logic. So help me understand
the Eagles
that.
are a good
Jerry
example.
Jones is waiting for. Yeah.
I mean, Dan, aren't the Eagles a great example, right? Like of doing it the other way. I mean, they got Devontae Smith done early. That deal looks very reasonable. They've kept redoing A.J. Brown's deal. They took advantage of Saquon Barkley in a depressed running back market. There are teams that have moved faster on these things, and so I'm with you 100% on that, on where the waiting to do a deal usually just costs you money.
Explain this where and once again, the timing of a story coming out is really important of how big it is or how small it is. The Nick Saban may come back to coaching, and you had his one of his former quarterbacks saying he had a good source here. Paul Feinbaum said this. Now, what is this leading to with Nick Saban?
So I would say that maybe there's an itch that he wants to scratch, or he wants to at least explore scratching in the NFL. I think Urban Meyer was on the air somewhere. I think he was on with Colin or someone like that. And he said something along the lines of I don't think he'll do it in college because of all of the reasons that he left college football in the first place, but I could see him doing it in the NFL, right? And so I think the possibility exists that maybe he looks at it and says, if there is a situation where I can win quickly, where there's a quarterback I don't feel completely satisfied with what happened in Miami 20 years ago. And every time he talks about the NFL, he'll bring up the Miami doctors and their assessment of Breeze. And if you remember, Dan, I mean, people were picking them to go to the Super Bowl in 2006, which was his last year in Miami. And obviously, the Culpepper thing went the wrong way, and the Breeze thing went the right way in New Orleans. And so there's always been that question lingering out there. If the doctors had cleared Drew Brees in Miami, he would have signed there. What would it have become? Would Nick Saban have ever gotten to Alabama? So the same way we've always asked those questions, does he ask that question of himself, especially when he's looking at it and saying the college game's a little too complicated right now. There are a lot of elements that I just don't want to deal with. But if I go to the NFL, I can just focus on coaching football. And if I have a veteran team with an established quarterback, I could maybe step in and be a difference maker. Because I don't think anybody, Dan, thought coming out of his 2 years in Miami that he wasn't a good enough coach to coach in the NFL. Like he was fine as a coach. It was the program, and it was that he couldn't win at a high enough level quick enough to sell the players on what was a very demanding program. But he's adjusted in a lot of ways over the years. So it'd be interesting to see how he would apply that to the NFL. I don't know like what his appetite is for it right now, but I certainly think that if he made himself available, there would probably be a team or two out there that would be interested in looking at bringing him in here in whatever it is, 5 or 6 months from now.
More likely to coach in the NFL again, Bill Belichick or Nick Saban?
I mean, I'd say Bill just because I think Bill would jump at the opportunity. Well, see, that's hard because I think what's happened over the last year has sort of damaged Bill to some degree. Do I think he still has a desire to coach in the NFL? I do. I don't know that. I'm not certain how much Nick would want to coach in the NFL. I feel pretty strongly that Bill would like to take another swing at coaching in the NFL. So just by default, for that reason, I would say Bill. But I think hiring either of those guys is complicated. It's like almost like I've compared it to. It's almost like when Tom Brady was a free agent, or when Aaron Rodgers has been out there the last couple of years. It's like, yes, that guy's really good at that job, but for a team to bring that person in, they need to check a lot of boxes. Does the coach or quarterback like the geography of the place? Is the team in a win now spot? Does the team have a quarterback? Is the infrastructure of the organization, does it fit that coach or quarterback? Like, I think when you're talking about these older guys, what limits the pool of teams that would be interested in them really is the amount of boxes that you have to check to be in a position where there would be mutual interest. So I think that's what Bill or Nick would be battling if they're looking to get into the NFL in 26.
He's the Monday morning quarterback, Albert Breer. How much pressure are the Commanders slash the NFL under with the President of the United States saying, I demand that they return to their previous nickname?
I like as much as this has been talked about, Dan. I like when I've talked to Commanders people about this over the last couple of years. I like every time I go to them, it's like that's not even we don't even we haven't even discussed that. That's not even something that we would bring up. And so like if those conversations are happening in the Commanders organization, they are at a very high level and they're being kept very, very quiet. I would be surprised just because I think it would be a reaction to what's happening in the here and the now. And I think it would be asking for another problem to come up in 5 or 10 years after everything that they went through and after all that they endured over the last 20 years in the fight over that name. By going back to the name, I think you would be sort of inviting that same conversation to crop up. Now, maybe it would be okay at first, but you'd be inviting that conversation to crop back up very, very quickly. And I think there are ways that Josh Harris and his ownership group and Adam Peters and Dan Quinn can celebrate their past, can celebrate the history of the franchise, can honor the history of the franchise without going back to that name. And I'm saying that without like presenting my own opinion on it. But I just think like going back to that name might help you in certain ways today, but I think you'd be creating another long-term problem for yourself. And I again, like I just haven't sensed any appetite within the organization to go there.
Yeah, the only reason why it probably doesn't go away, like the Guardians, the Cleveland
Yeah.
Guardians, they're not
Yep.
going back to the Indians. I think they've
Yeah.
already said they're not. But there's no stadium involved
I
in
know.
this. The Commanders, there's a stadium involved in this, and that's why I don't know if the president gets involved in that, gets his hands
Well,
dirty in saying, hey, I can hold up this stadium situation here.
and I would like on the flip side to kind of get behind your point a little bit. I Donald Trump did that photo op with Roger Goodell and Josh Harris in the Oval Office in May to announce the draft is coming to Washington in 2027. So I just kind of thought to myself, that looks funny. Like, what's going on there? And so I started Googling, like, I Googled Goodell Trump, Googled Goodell Biden, I Googled Goodell Obama, I Googled Goodell Bush. And then finally, I found a picture of George W. Bush and Paul Tagliabue in 2003 promoting the kickoff game being in Washington. They did a photo op to promote, I think it was the Redskins and the Jets at the time, playing in the kickoff game. So it had been 22 years since a sitting president did a photo op with an NFL commissioner. And it was right around the time when the Pete Rose stuff was going on in baseball. And so, I think there's some speculation that could be tied to the Justice Department and the ESPN NFL Network merger. And would Donald Trump put his thumb on the scale one way or the other? Like it does seem like he's trying, like President Trump is trying to involve himself in sports on a bunch of different levels. And so, I think that's the one reason why you look at this and you say, maybe that will put some pressure on the Commanders to do something here, because it is such a big deal getting a new stadium built. Again, I have a hard time seeing them going back, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, I remember when I saw that the commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, was meeting with Donald Trump, and they were going to talk
Yeah,
about Pete Rose. And I said on the air, I said, Pete Rose is going to get on the ballot again. He
yeah,
will get on the ballot. Now, have I learned some things behind the scenes with that? I have. I just
yeah.
I have to be careful with that because I want a second source on this. But, what the president was suggesting to the commissioner, that these things could happen. We need to have this happen, and look, it's a victory lap for the president because
Yep.
everybody's going to go, yeah, Pete should be in the Hall of Fame. I think we can all agree should be in the Hall of Fame, or at least put him on the ballot if you want to. But that's why I'm just curious of the logic, the angle of this with the Commanders and also the Guardians. I did want to follow up. The NFL Players Association.
Yep.
This feels like a mess. Well, it is a mess.
Disaster.
But I want to know what does this mean for the football fan? Because we can get caught up in all of this,
Yeah.
and we know a lot of the people who are involved in this. But if I'm a football fan, why do I care what's going on? The unrest that people are stepping down with the Players Association.
Well, I think first of all, as far as big box decisions like 18 games, it could put a hold on those. Like anything that the players have power over, I think now the union hits the pause button while it's sorting its own house out. The other thing is that you don't know what the approach of the next executive director is. Now, to me, like the executive director of the NFLPA, that's one of the most difficult jobs in sports. It's different than the basketball or baseball or hockey union because there are so many more players, and the great majority of players are 22, 23, 24 years old that may or may not make $1 million in career earnings, and try getting those guys to walk away from a paycheck to make a point, which is the trump card of any union, right? Is we're going to take money out of the owners' pockets by staging a work stoppage. So it's a tough group to keep together. It's a tough group to unify. And this is an opportunity now for the players to decide what they want out of their union. And I think this becomes a seminal moment for them. So when we're talking about 18 games, when we're talking about the owners opting out of the broadcast deals at the end of the decade, when we're talking about the next CBA, which will be at the beginning of the next decade, this could all look different because I think the football unions operated a certain way, over the last 20 years or so, and this is a chance for the players to reinvent the whole thing. So they're going to decide what's important to them, and I think that they need to take the opportunity to really kind of look in the mirror and say, like, what is the function of this union? Where do we want this to go? What are our priorities? There are going to be some complex conversations with guys who are on the executive committee, with the player reps, and it'll be really interesting to see where that goes. But when you're talking about 18 games, when you're talking about work stoppages, when you're talking about what the broadcast deals look like going forward, international, like anything that the players can affect, anything the players can stop from happening, I think now, the pause button is pressed on that stuff. And, I think all of it becomes subject to however the players want to reinvent things.
Good to chat with you again. Thank you, Albert.
Awesome. Thanks, DB.
That's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback.